Welcome back to the Agriland Pavilion here at the National Ploughing Championships in Ratheniska in County Laois. On our panel now we have Independent TD Michael Healy Ray and Fine Gael MEP Colm Markey joining us. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, gentlemen. I suppose while I have you, first of all I might go to you, MEP Markey, in relation to what's happening, what is everybody talking about up and down the length and breadth of the championship site here today. What everyone is talking about is the cost of energy. People are heading into the winter, it's end of September, next thing it's October, November, December, and people are wondering how they're going to pay energy bills. What can you say to them? What hope can you give people? Because there doesn't seem to be a huge amount coming out from their point of view at the minute that's going to reduce their bills in a month's time or 2 months' time.
Yeah, well, clearly we're dealing with a situation where, as a result of the war, there's massive constraints in relation to energy. And from a European perspective, I suppose Europe has done a lot of work to, if you like, remove our dependency on Russian gas, and through the like of imported LNG and similar. And I suppose one thing that's been done that's very positive in the last week or two is the idea that we've actually increased our reserves up to 85% of the full volume in Europe, which means to some degree we are less dependent on Russian gas, and that allows, I think, even in the last week there's been some small indications that that's having an impact on the market. So for Europe to actually ensure that it has a secure supply of its own gas, that may be through the like of LNG. I think the idea of an LNG terminal here in Ireland is something we've long debated for. I think something we need to make happen. But certainly at one level we have to wean ourselves off Russian dependency on gas. In the longer term, agriculture is a massive opportunity to be part of the solution to this in terms of renewable energies through solar on our farms, anaerobic digestion, wind power. All these can play a part in securing our longer term energy future. But in the short term, we have to ensure that we're weaned off Russian gas. That's number one. At a national level, in terms of, let's say, the windfall profits that clearly we've heard about this week from the like of ESB, they have to be taxed in order to recycle that money back into the consumer. I think one of the things that's there, only 20% of our energy production across Europe is dependent on Russian gas, of electricity. And the other 80%, the likes of wind energy or renewables or even nuclear, its cost base hasn't changed. So at European level we have to look at that in terms of how we can ensure that the wholesale price of gas is more reflective of, let's say, that 80% rather than the 20%. And we also have to look in terms of that windfall tax scenario whereby some companies have made supernormal profits, in terms of ESB being an example. And that money we need to cushion people's bills at both a consumer level but equally at business level. Like that has to happen. But more fundamentally, if we don't tackle the underlying cause, the wholesale price of gas, it's hard to redistribute to the businesses. You talk about those who are poverty or energy poor, and there's an issue there. But more importantly, businesses that sustain their cost base has gone up. We have to make sure that comes down. And by tackling the wholesale price of gas, by making sure we're less dependent on Russian gas, diverting gas from the likes of Norway to Ireland, but LNG in particular, and making more use of renewables in the long term is a lot of our solution. And we're working towards that. The fact that 85% of our reserves are filled across Europe has to be a positive. That's having a knock-on effect here in Ireland. But we need, in the short term, to have more tax measures in the budget, which I think will come. I'm obviously not privy to that, but I think the government is working on that in the short term, and in the medium term we have to get delivery of those.
I understand that in the long term there are solutions there. Ursula von der Leyen has come out with numerous measures that she thinks long term will really help bring down the cost of energy. But Michael Healy Ray, at the end of the day, the people who have to pay their power bill next month, they have to pay the power bill in November and the power bill in December. Whether or not Ursula von der Leyen said last week that certain measures are going to come in, or whether Ireland will consider LNG, be it in Shannon or wherever down the road, that's not going to help anyone this winter.
No, it's not. The funny thing, and I don't ever like when I'm in a debate like this, take issue with what a person says, but I have to take issue with a lot of what you said, and I'll tell you why. You speak about an LNG facility. You must remember that in 2016, it was in the programme for government that we would support an LNG facility in North Kerry. You must remember that the party that you belong to came along in 2020 and gave in to the Greens in what they wanted. And because the Greens said, we do not want an LNG facility in North Kerry, your party agreed to it, so did Fianna Fáil. And like, they all just rode in like the merry ploughboy behind the Greens and said, yes, no problem. Now everybody knows that was a stupid, wrong decision. And when I hear people like the present Taoiseach coming along and saying, well, we have to look at it. I mean, look at it. Why did they throw it out with the kitchen sink? It was totally crazy. And I mean, they've landed us now in the situation that we've an over-reliance on imported gas, and that we could have been taking care of our own needs. And one thing about today, and it's a very, you asked a question earlier, you said, what are people up and down saying today? I'll tell you what they're all saying. It's unique to think, and the listeners of Agriland would be interested in this, that today there is a proposal being looked at by Fianna Fáil, by Fine Gael, by the Greens, whereby they're looking at banning ploughing on thousands and thousands of acres of land in Ireland. And it's ironic to think that we'll have politicians here today inside in tents promoting their parties, but their parties are promoting the banning of ploughing in Ireland. How against the grain could you possibly go? And like, people will have to start calling this type of nonsense out for what it is, nonsense. And I've read in great detail the reasons why they're thinking of putting in a ban on thousands of acres of land in Ireland being ploughed, and it does not make sense. No more than it made sense to stop us of producing peat briquettes in Ireland, dismantling the facility that we had, sending it over to Poland, constructing it there. They're making briquettes there, and we're importing them here. I mean, politicians are losing the run of themselves, but they will all have to face somebody who's very important, and that is the electorate. And the electorate, the people that are walking up and down here today, that came here in motor cars and vans and jeeps, which if you were to take our parties to their logical conclusion, they wouldn't want him to be here at all today, because they'd say they were wasting, they were bad for the environment by coming here today. Like, we have to call out a lot of the nonsense that's going on and deal with the realities of today, and
but
that people want to live
Michael Healy,
today.
are that hindsight is 2020. We can always criticise people for what the decisions that were made at a certain time based on information that was available at a certain time. There's also science, whether you have read through it and disagree with it or not, that say that we do have to protect our environment. That if we basically go overboard, we won't have an environment left for any electorate.
I'm not saying anything with regard to, I'm as worried about the environment as any farmer is, because remember, the custodians of the land are the real Green Party. They're the real green people, the people who own land. They're the real people, and they're the people who understand the land. They've worked so hard, they're not going to take it with them. All they want to do is pass it on to future generations. They don't need people in suits telling them how to run their farms. They do not, absolutely. But when you speak about hindsight is great, well, in 2016, if the people that were there that time, for instance, on the LNG issue, if they thought that was a good idea and to put it in the programme for government, that it was a name and an ambition, why did they decide to throw it out in 2020? The reason was because the policy is being promoted by the Green Party, and you see, people here today have said to me, well, what about Eamon Ryan? Is he coming to the ploughing? And I said, don't mind talking about Eamon Ryan. You must talk about the people who are keeping him there and who are promoting his policies, and they are Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And if Eamon Ryan comes up with some nonsensical suggestion, which he has come up with plenty of them, right? What's keeping him there? What's getting the listening for him? The fact that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are capitulating so much to him. And that's why politicians have to stand up and speak their own minds and say what's right for the people. And for instance, as we're talking about farming, people on small farms and medium-sized farms and large farms are struggling at present. The inflation that they're enduring is unbelievable, and to be honest with you, government are doing nothing, if anything, to help them. And I'll raise one other very important issue. It's also a proposal by government at present. The Taxation Commission has this suggestion of doing away with green diesel. So that, in other words, if you're a farmer and if you're spreading slurry or if you're cutting silage, that you'll have to put white diesel into a tractor, that we'll have to start using white diesel in all the quarries, the same as they're doing over in England and in the north. That's not helping rural Ireland. That's not helping the farming community. And again, it's going along with this whole thing of that nobody is willing to stand up and say stop. Nobody is willing to say we have to have common sense here.
Well, what I will say is, I know people can say politicians don't know and they're not tuned in, but Colm Markey, in all fairness, you're a dairy farmer in Ireland. You know what it's like. Obviously, you're in Europe as well now at the same time, but you have first-hand knowledge of the input rises that farmers are experiencing, the energy rises that farmers are experiencing, people in rural life, because it's not just farmers. It's not farmers and tractors. It's farm families that are experiencing, food prices are going up, their weekly shop is going up, the other car that brings the kids to school or the kids going to college, bus prices are going up. So how is something going to help them in the short term? Granted, there are some long-term, certainly some long-term measures there that can be taken, but is it a case then for national government to come back, and the budget next week needs to play a big part in this?
I think the national government have signalled very clearly that the budget next week is going to be about cushioning people's issues with the cost of living, and they've signalled that there's going to be a very substantial package. Like originally people were looking for $1 billion or $2 billion in a package. Current indication says the current government, because of how well the economy has been run, is looking at possibly twice that in terms of a package to give back to people, and that is a measure of the commitment of this government. And just to get back to the situation about like if you look at the Fine Gael TDs, senators, and indeed myself as an MEP, the rural Fine Gael politicians have very much stood up on things like Glanbia, when Glanbia's potential to expand the dairy sector in this country was being undermined by objections. And we've also stood up in relation to various things as regards the emissions and the responsibilities that agriculture has. And we've been very clear that there is a very strong voice in government for rural Ireland. And secondly, as regards the mention of it being government policy in 2016, that was Fine Gael government policy. Fine Gael were committed to that policy. However, Fine Gael had to go into it because of the fact of having the compromise in the government. Fine Gael had to agree with Fianna Fáil and, if you like, the Green Party in relation to that. We would like to see facilities of that nature. Certainly, I personally would like to see facilities of that nature in place. Secondly, in relation to at a European level, I personally this week am contacting the Commissioner in relation to what is the strategy around fertiliser security for next year, because I want a response from the Commission specifically to make sure advanced planning is made to ensure that we have the fertiliser that every farmer up and down here needs at a cost-effective price. Energy and things like fertiliser are the fundamental building blocks of the cost base of your economy. If we can keep our food production cheap by having cheap, reasonable price raw materials going into that feeds through then to the ordinary consumer on the ground. In the short term, we need a response in the budget from the government. It's clearly been signalled that is coming. And secondly to that, then we need the longer term response at European level and at national level to ensure that we if you like, get full control of this situation over the next 3 to 6 months. The government has been quite clear. There's $2.5 billion already invested in the last 12 months in support to people. There's $4 billion coming down the road. It's like windfall taxes, which is taking them profits and reinvesting them to make sure the ordinary consumer and the ordinary small businesses and farmers like ourselves on the ground all get protected from what ultimately is a global situation. It's not a national situation, it's not of the government's making, it's a global situation, which in fairness to this government they're very aware of, and because the economy is in such a strong position, are in a place to put that $4 billion to cushion the effect of a global scenario for Irish consumers and Irish businesses.
Michael Healy, the Minister for Agriculture will be here, and he'll indeed be on the Agriland pavilion later on today. But if you had the ear of the Minister for Agriculture at the moment, what are the farmers in Kerry saying to you at the moment? What are their biggest concerns?
What they're saying to me is that the inflation they're enduring is unbelievable on them, and they certainly want a Minister for Agriculture that will stand with them and for them and not against them. And I would ask you to ask the Minister, would he please not change the VAT rate on green diesel and make it the same price as white diesel, because we don't want that? Would you please ask the Minister to ensure that the suggestion of banning ploughing in Ireland, that he will throw that out the window for the nonsensical rubbish that it is? Would you please ask the Minister for Agriculture to ensure that people that want to cut turf will not be banned from doing so? Will you please ask the Minister why it makes sense that small shops and fuel suppliers that sold bags of coal and timber are now going to be looking over their shoulder if they're going to continue to serve their customers in the future with coal, because he doesn't want them to do so, and the parties that are in government don't want them to do so. Would you please ask people that are hypocritical and talk out of both sides of their mouth for once and for all to say they're either standing with farmers or they're standing against farmers? But you can't have it both ways. And
Can you not say that farmers are forward enough and evolved enough to actually it doesn't have to be you're a for or against. You're either for farming, so you're against the climate, or you're for the climate and you're against farming. You're making that very divisive. That's not necessary. I've met plenty of farmers out in the ploughing today who are well aware of methods like less slurry spreading, who know how to breed so that they get better genetics, and they're all happy to take on board that. They're not completely ignorant of what's being asked of them, and they can go along with that as well.
I'm already after tell you that the farmers of Ireland are the real environmentalists. They are the real green people. They are the real people who are concerned about the environment because they own it. It's theirs. It's their land. And they want to pass it on to future generations better than the way they got it. But in the quest for some of the things that government are trying to achieve, they're doing stupid things then as well that aren't necessary. And a farm that's well run is one of the most carbon neutral things that we can have. There's nothing about the sequestering of the natural woodlands that we have. And when they were taking everything into account, they didn't take into account existing hedgerows which are being maintained by farmers, and the fact that a properly run farm from an environmental point of view is the best thing that we have, and the farms in Ireland are better than any other farms in that regard. But what the farmers are getting is no thanks whatsoever for it, and I really mean that. And they do feel that people in government aren't for them, but that they are against them, and they really feel that, and they don't see or hear people from the government parties standing up for them.
Well, I will take up that point in fairness to Michael there, Colm, and this is something you've talked about a lot, is afforestation. We're encouraging more afforestation, forestry growth and so on. But at the end of the day, and I spoke to the farm organisation presidents earlier about this, Michael's right in a way, they're not getting the credit for the likes of carbon sequestration or carbon credits from afforestation. I mean, that's in terms of emissions reductions, that goes to a different land use sector. So it is, I suppose, hard, and some farmers, not all, but some farmers feel a little bit hard done by when the likes of directives are coming from Europe, be it nitrates, for example, be it farm to fork biodiversity strategies, and they're trying to implement some of these and they're not getting the credit for them even.
I think carbon farming is a key part of the way we're going forward. And I think, in fairness, me personally at European level, I've pushed very hard to try and get a carbon farming structure in place that rewards farmers for the carbon they're sequestering in their grasslands, in their hedgerows, and ensures that all the efforts that we're making in relation to the environment, because farmers are the original environmentalists. I personally became a farmer because I love working and dealing with that environment, and I have a personal engagement with that. I think most farmers do, but a lot of farmers like me are very frustrated by the fact that we're being painted by this narrative of we're opposed to everything. Farmers are not opposed. I met a number of farmers yesterday, I meet them every day, they've been on to me here again today, where farmers want to put their best foot forward, but they want practical, realistic solutions owned by farmers. When we get a constant narrative that all that's there is wrong and all these silly things that have been done, it's almost like creating the impression that farmers are opposed to any level of change. Farmers, in my book, are very much up for change, as long as practical, sensible change, as long as they get recognition for the carbon they sequester in their land, be it hedgerows or on the grassland, and also the potential they have to generate renewable energy through solar or wind or various solar panels, for instance, on their buildings. Farmers are very much up for that, and as someone who's pushed very hard for this at European level and looked for changes within European schemes to allow the likes of TAMS grants fund the installation of solar panels, but equally allows them to supply that power onto the grid. And So it's issues like this that farmers are interested in putting their best foot forward. And we've had a debate over the last month or two about the future of agriculture in terms of emissions. And I hear from many people that that debate is behind now. We have a figure, and it's about us showing that we can do the best we can to achieve that. Teagasc have the measures in place. There are practical and straightforward measures in many places, low emission slurry spreading, changes in some types of fertiliser. And if we do that much, we can be the sector that's ahead in terms of this. The frustration I have is that certain other elements of the agenda, the broader public agenda, doesn't stop and listen to the farmers and the farmers' perspective about how we get practical and sensible solutions to that. We can have easy, simplistic lines about what the government isn't doing, but the government is committed to, if you like, supporting farmers in terms of this transition and in supporting the likes of transition to
Finally, Mikey,
and on that, I'll just take you up on one issue that you chose to ignore completely. What did this government do for the horticultural industry? They threw them to the wolves. For example, when they were very concerned at the fact that Bornemona was closing down and they wouldn't have their mass peat, which is the vital ingredient that they need for their business, and they employ 20 to 25,000 people directly, they were thrown completely to the wolves and left without that resource that they need, which now has to be imported. That doesn't make sense. 1946 was the last time that a government planted as little forestry as what this present government is planting. And then they tell us that they're interested in the environment. What are they doing for the environment if we can't have a proper, strong planting program? But at the moment, any young farmer that would consider seriously planting land at the moment, he would actually or she would want to get their heads examined, because there's nothing attractive in it for them when the people that have forestry can't get a license to make a road, to thin it, or to clear fill it. People will tell you of the nightmares, 2 and 3 years of waiting. What is the government doing about that? You're saying that I'm critical of the government. I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm doing one thing here today. I'm telling the truth. And the truth is shameful on the government, because they're falling down in every one of the points. And if anything that I've said about 1946 being the last time we had these little trees being planted, if that's wrong, correct me. If I'm wrong about the horticultural industry, that will tell you that your government and the people that you're supporting have thrown them completely to the wolves. If I'm wrong, contradict me and correct me.
Well, we'll have Minister of State Pippa Hackett on with us on the Agriland stage throughout our live stream, so we'll be able to put those questions to her.
All I'm sorry is that I'm not on with her.
All I'm doing. So we'll just wrap it up very briefly. We're running out of time there.
But with all due respect, I'm the very person who brought forward the push for greater funding for the forestry industry, that recognised many of the issues around the challenges that are facing forestry. We as a party have pushed them, particularly at government level, and as regards to peat, equally I've pushed very much to see that those issues are addressed as well.
Personally you might have, but they have delivered nothing.
We are working on it. I wait for the scheme that will come out now shortly in relation to the forestry and the measures. We all know the measures are needed. We all know that the figures aren't high enough, and we are working to push the change to ensure that we get up to 8,000 hectares.
And we are awaiting the forestry scheme to be announced this autumn, and obviously the budget will tell a lot as well next week. MEP Colm, Markey and Independent TD Michael Healy-Rae, thank you very much for joining us on the Agriland live stream in the Agriland Pavilion at the Ploughing Championships today. It's out and about now again to our team on the Ploughing site, where they're talking to the individual stallholders and exhibitors.